So good evening, everyone. My name is Michael, G0POT, and tonight I'm going to talk about SOTA, or Summits on the Air. I've been an active participant of the SOTA scheme for quite a number of years now. Really love doing it, and I'm really enthusiastic about sharing it with other people. But I guess the questions that I want to answer tonight are, what is it? Why would we think about doing it? And how do we go about doing it? And when I look at the how we do it, I'm going to split it into two parts. I'm going to talk about the walking, the hill climbing part, and then I'm going to talk about the portable or operating part, because they're slightly different beasts, and we need to think about them separately. So what exactly is SOTA? First of all, it's not a contest. It's a radio awards program. So it's not about short, sharp, trying to get as many contacts in as you possibly can. It can be as relaxed or as contest-like as you like. The whole aim of it really is to encourage portable operation, and specifically from hills or mountainous locations. So I'm a big fan of portable operation anyway, but the beauty of SOTA is it encourages you to climb some fairly small hills, but also some serious mountains. The whole idea was originally devised by a chap called John, G3WGV. I think he mulled over this idea for a couple of years before he came across Richard, G3CWI, who you may know from SOTA Beams, the owner of SOTA Beams. He had a website called the European Adventure Radio website. And I think John saw that there was somebody else who had similar ideas and aspirations to him, got together with Richard, and they started to flesh out this idea of SOTA. And they got a few more people involved, and about 15 years ago, back in 2002, they finally launched this awards program. At that time, it was just in the UK. It's since grown quite significantly. It now covers roughly 55 countries, I think, are involved now. So it's got quite a wide uptake. So how does it work? Well, qualifying hills are worth points. What is a qualifying hill? That can depend on what country you're in. So in the UK, what that means is any hill with a prominence of more than 150 meters. That is, it has a 150 meter fall off in every direction. Some countries, it differs. The UK obviously has got a reasonable selection of hills. Some countries have got a very flat, some countries have got hundreds of really big hills. And I think it can differ from country to country exactly what qualifies. There's two parts to it. There's a kind of activator side and a chaser side. So chasers are the people that sit at home in their nice, warm, comfortable shacks, chasing the people who are actually climbing the hill. So they're trying to make contacts with people who are activating the summits. And obviously then the activators are the ones that are doing the hard work. They're the ones that are doing the climbing, getting out in the hot, the cold, setting up their portable stations and activating these summits. As I said, each summit is worth a number of points. The simplest summits are just worth 1 point. Slightly more complex or harder summits are worth 2, and then it goes up 4, 6, 8, and 10. So the hardest summits, the mountains, are worth 10 points. There's a range of scores that you can achieve by activating and working people on summits, and that means it's quite nice because it can appeal to people with different abilities. You don't necessarily have to be a mountain climber and go out there and do all those 10 pointers. You can do some quite simple summits and just earn 1 or 2 points for a summit. The summit is only worth points to you once a year. So if I go and activate my local hill, I can earn my 1 point for it. But if I activate it again, which I can do, and I can give away points to other people, I won't earn another point for that. And similarly, if I chase someone working on, say, Snowdon, I can earn my 10 points for working them, but that's it for 12 months. If I work anyone else on there, I'm not going to earn points for that. And the other thing they have is something called a winter bonus to acknowledge how difficult working and how miserable working on top of the hill can be during the winter. Some summits can attract a winter bonus of 3 points. They tend to be the higher and more challenging summits. So if you work those, if you operate from those during the winter months, you can actually earn an extra 3 points. So why do SOTA? Why take part? Well, for me, this picture kind of sums it up. This is a view from Llywydd in Snowdonia. The snowy peak to the right is Snowdon itself, and that little peak down in the middle is another hill called Arran. So these are three SOTA summits that I worked recently. It's just fantastic. I mean, the climbing, I like the walking, I love the climbing, I love the outdoors. Being up on top of a mountain, watching the sun coming up, there's nothing better. And then to introduce a bit of amateur radio into that and making contacts from that is fantastic. The other great thing about SOTA is by operating from hilltops, you essentially become like a DX. There's lots of people out there, chasers, there's lots of people who want to work you, and they're really excited to try and get you. So you find yourself at the bottom of little pile-ups. So as a way of working portably, where your radio might be very low power, your antennas might be very inefficient, actually you can work a huge number of stations because everyone wants to try and work you. So how do you then get involved? You're sucked in now, you love the look of this. How do you actually get involved? Well, a great starting point is to do some chasing. It'll introduce you to the whole concept. It'll get you used to the kind of overs that people are having from hilltops, those who like nice, short, quick contest exchanges, those who like to have a little bit more of a chat and exchange some information. So doing a little bit of chasing is a great way to get started. Now, how do you go about finding stations to chase? Well, you can obviously have a tune around in the hope that you can hear people calling CQ SOTA, and that's what activators tend to do. They call CQ SOTA. But a great place to start is the SOTA Watch website at sotawatch.org. And here they have people can spot themselves or other people can spot them and highlight the summit that you're working on, the frequency and the mode you're working. This site also has an area to highlight activations. So if you're planning an activation, you can post that in advance so people can see that you're going to be on a hill on a certain day at a certain time. Now, looking at the spots, let me just explain this. We have the day, the time. The most recent spots are at the top, followed by the call sign of the station that's working the summit. Interestingly, American stations don't tend to use the /P for portable activation. Most Europeans do. I don't think it's part of the UK license requirement anymore, but most portable operators will still sign /portable. This is then followed by a little identifier. This is the SOTA Summit reference, and it's unique for every summit. So it has a prefix, which is the country or the association. So a country like America has quite a few associations or areas. Each association is then broken down into zones. So for instance, Wales, where I was operating a couple of weeks ago, is broken down into 3 zones. And then each zone has unique hill references starting from number 1. So this is a unique reference for a summit, and this is what the activator is going to be announcing when he's working from that location. The spotting also includes the frequency that's being used and the mode. Now, if you're operating CW, you have the opportunity to either log into this website and spot yourself, or you can set up an upcoming activation to say that you're going to be active on a hill, and then if RBN picks you up, the SOTA watch can link the two things and it automatically spots you. So where you see RBN Hull, that is a system that's using RBN to automatically spot you based on a planned activation that you've entered into SOTA watch. There's also a way of doing this using SMS from your phone, and we'll cover that when we talk a little bit about activating in a minute. So that's a great way of starting, by chasing people, and the best way to find stations to work who are activating summits is to use SOTA watch. So you've had a go at that, you've enjoyed that, now you want to have a go on a hill yourself. So how are you going to find a summit to work? Another really good website for SOTA users is called sotadata.org.uk, and it has something called the SOTA mapping project on it. So if you go to the menu, you'll find SOTA mapping project as an option, and you can select the country you're in. So we choose the association. Here I've chosen Wales, but you can select your country of operation. You then choose the region, and as I said, as it happens, Wales is divided up into 3 regions: the north, the middle, and the south. Quite simple. And you can see that in the north of Wales there are 77 summits. And then you can either select the summit you want to view, or you can simply view the map now, and it'll show you all of the summits that are available in that region. So this way you can use the map to find a summit that's close to you. Now you'll notice each of the summits has got a different color and a different number, and this is the number of points it's worth. Do you remember I said simple summits, 1 point, slightly harder, 2 points, and then they increase in hardness 4, 8, and 10 points. So those red 10 pointers are serious mountains. The 8s are going to be a really, really challenging hill as well. The 6 is starting to get a little bit less challenging, a little bit easier, but still a good day's hiking probably. 4's easier still, and it gradually goes down. Some 1 point hills you can actually drive to the top of. So 1's a good place to start, and I recommend if you're going to have a go at a hill, you find something that's local to you and that's either a 1 or a 2 point hill, a good starting point. Making it local is quite important. If you haven't operated portable before, the first time you get there, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to forget the power lead, the microphone, that critical adapter that connects your radio to the antenna. You're going to make those mistakes. So if you've traveled a long way, that's really depressing. So go for a nice, easy 1 point summit that's close to you. So at this point, while we're talking about planning, let me start now splitting into the walking side of things, the hill climbing, and we'll do the radio separately in a moment. So we've gone to our SOTA data site, and we found a summit that's close to us. So here now I'm looking at England, I'm looking at southern England, and this is my local summit. I live not far from here. And if I click on the triangle, I get a lovely little box pop up, which tells me Walbury Hill, that's the name of my local hill, and a little bit of information about it. If I then click on the name, it takes me to a data page for my summit. Now this is really, really useful for activators. It has a little bit of information about the summit, including the grid reference, and we're going to use that in a minute. You can see how often it's activated and who's been activating it. So you can see I appear a few times in this list because it's my local summit. You can see what bands have been activated and how often. So that can give you some good information about whether maybe a summit is very easy for one setup and not so good for another. So if you can see a summit is never activated using 2 meters, there might be a really good reason for that, like there's a paging system that causes lots of interference. But the critical thing here is these links at the bottom. Oops, apologies. There we go. These links at the bottom. These are links to people's blogs and information that people have captured about activating this particular hill. And this is so useful for you in planning your activity because it allows you to see where other people have parked, the challenges maybe they've had finding the route up, issues that they've had on the summit itself. Maybe it was crowded with people, maybe there's nowhere to stick a dipole. They can share really important things with you, which is great to have that information before you travel a long way to actually go and have a go yourself. So I tend to go through these links, read other people's blogs and find out some key information about the summit activation itself before I actually set out. So then what I do is I take that grid reference, Sierra Uniform 373616 in this case, and I go to streetmap.co.uk. Now, hopefully other countries have got something very similar in terms of being able to see Ordnance Survey maps. Those are maps with the height contour lines in them and details of not just the roads but the countryside. And we're going to use this to help us plan. So here we can see my local hill, which is Walbury Hill. The summit is actually where the little blue triangle is, and that's a trig point. Now, the trig point doesn't necessarily have to be on a summit or the highest point. You can see this one to the left is actually not at the highest point. They were used for, obviously, working out the mapping and being able to map the height of various points for map making, but they don't necessarily put them at the highest point. So be careful, not all trig points are at the summit itself. I use this map now to look at where to park along with the blocks. And I found from experience that it's a good idea to have a plan B with the parking. So I know that my local summit has a lovely little car park just here, which is plenty big enough for all the cars that you need there. I can see there's another parking opportunity over to the right. Now, I've been to summits where the car park that's marked, when you get there, it's locked and you can't get in. I've been to others where the only place to park is a little lay-by the side of the road, and some very, very nice person has parked a van right slap bang in the middle of it, so you can't get any other cars in there. If you haven't planned for somewhere else to park, then sometimes it can be really challenging when you're actually on the ground to find another car parking area. It's very difficult. You haven't got the visibility, you can't see the terrain, you can't see where other possibilities are. So having these documented, I think, is really helpful. And where possible, I program these into my GPS as well in the car so that I can make my way straight to them. From the map, I can also look at the activation zone for this summit. Now, the AZ, or activation zone, is an area that's within 25 vertical meters of the summit peak itself. Now, the reason that SOTA do this is because some summits are very small, and if you've got to share them with other hill users, other walkers, it could be very, very inconvenient if you're plonked right on the top with a big aerial, and they've got kids, dogs, people trying to enjoy the summit as well. So to try and give a little bit of flexibility with where you set up so that you don't have to be in the mix of things, they have a rule that as long as you're within 25 meters of the summit, that's sufficient to activate it. So in this case, my summit is 297 meters. I can operate anywhere above 272 meters. So as you can see, 200, that's 280, 275. That actually covers quite a big area. So my activation zone is very big. In fact, it almost takes in the car park, I think. So it's worth looking at the shape and the activation zone, because when you get to the summit, you may find the absolute peak is not a good place to set up and do radio. So being clear where you can set up is really helpful. Just on the point of the car park there are SOTA summits where the car park sits within the activation zone. But the idea of SOTA is that there's some climbing and some walking involved. It's not appropriate to drive to a summit and operate from inside your car. You should get out of the car and preferably walk the last part to the summit. The flip side of that is SOTA aims to be inclusive. So we want people, everyone, to be able to do it. And if you have mobility issues, then being able to park up near the activation zone and maybe set up outside your car with a separate power supply, not being supplied by the car, that's absolutely fine. So I tend to print out these maps, and I take a paper map with me when I do a SOTA activation. I can plot a route, I can see the route I want to take here. I've got a public right of way across this land. As it happens, what the map doesn't show you is this is actually private land. And although there's access to get to the trig point for walkers, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to operate up here without permission. But I can see that there's a public right of way across here, so I know I'm good to activate somewhere along there. I take a copy of this with me. I do take a mapping app on my phone, which I find really useful, but as you're going to hear me say several times, batteries fail, and you can't guarantee that your mapping app on your phone is going to be working for you, so I always have a paper backup. So that is the basic research beforehand. I've decided on the hill that I want to go to. I've printed myself out a map and decided where I'm going to park and where the activation zone is that I need to get into to activate the hill. The next key thing about getting out and actually starting walking is being safe. So dressing for SOTA. The one thing you'll really notice is the temperature at the bottom of the hill is more or less much higher than at the top of the hill. The weather at the top of the hill is always going to be cooler and colder. You're more exposed to the elements, more exposed to the wind. If you're climbing a significant height, there is a natural temperature difference. So a few weeks back, I was climbing in Snowdonia, Mount Snowdon. It was about 4 degrees in the car park and a brisk wind where I left. At the hilltop, it was 0 degrees. There was a 70 to 80 kilometer wind, and the wind chill was about -10. And I'm telling you now, you really did feel it. So it's important to dress appropriately. Now, during a climb, you can get very hot, and it's good to have lots of layers. You can add or remove layers as necessary. I always then take a wind waterproof shell, not thick, it's not going to give me any warmth, but it just keeps the wind and keeps the rain off me. In fact, I take waterproof trousers and a waterproof coat. And if you take a nice thin waterproof shell, you can roll those up and put them in your backpack while you're actually walking. Now, if you're just walking, it's great. You can walk up a hill, you build up a nice bit of temperature. When you get to the top, you can enjoy the view, have a nice cup of tea, and then make your way down, no problems at all. But when you're operating radio, you're going to climb to the top of that hill, and then you've got to set up a station. That could take anything from 10 minutes to 30 minutes. You're going to operate 30 minutes to maybe a couple of hours if you have a nice long operation, and then you've got to pack up. So you're going to be sat on that hilltop for quite some time, and you will find your temperature drops. Just that constant breeze, that constant wind on you really saps the temperature from you. So having extra layers you can put on really helps. Now actually, even on some summer days when I'm doing a long operation, I put my waterproof trousers and jacket on, not to keep dry or not to keep warm, but just to keep the wind off me. And just that thin layer, just a t-shirt with a waterproof coat over the top, actually keeps the wind off me, and I'm absolutely fine on a sunny day. So let's look at some other things that I take with me when I'm doing a climb. Some of these are permanently in my bag. Some of them are a little bit more specialist, so if you're doing something a little bit more challenging, a bit higher. But all of these, oh, hang on a minute, there's a glass of wine. No, the wine's not critical. There we go. The phone's probably more critical. So all of these are things that I take with me when I'm climbing a summit. Now, we talked already about a map. I create a map for my own use. I mark where I'm going to park. I mark the path that I'm intending to take to the summit. I work out where my activation zone is, and I take this with me. I typically print this out and put it in a little A4 plastic sleeve that I can roll up and put in my pocket, and it supplements the mapping application that I've got on my phone. But the other really important reason for printing something like this out is that I leave this with somebody else. I have an emergency contact who knows that I'm going to be on a hillside. and I tell them where I'm going to park, what time I'm going to leave that car park, what time I think I'm going to get to the summit, how long I think I'm going to stay there, and then what time I think I'm going to get back. Now, this is important because although some summits we're quite lucky in this country, we do have reasonably good phone cell coverage, but someone stupidly thought to put mountains in the middle of nowhere. Who would have done that? So we don't always have phone coverage, and sometimes it's very difficult to be able to get in touch with someone to say you're okay. In fact, when I did this operation, I couldn't even reach anyone from the car park. I had to drive another 30 minutes before I came into telephone coverage. So having something like this, as soon as I get off the mountain or as soon as I get to phone coverage, I can ring someone to say I'm safe. If they don't hear from me, they can phone the emergency services, tell them where I'm parked. The emergency services can go there, see if my car is still there, and if it is, they know I'm somewhere out on this trail, and because they've got a map, they can now go and see and follow the route that they think I'm going to take. And to see if they can find me. So it's a good safety feature, especially if you're climbing on your own, and a lot of radio operators do. Now, communication is quite key. Most of us take a mobile phone. As I've just said, you just can't guarantee that you're going to have phone coverage. But also, if you're using your phone for satellite tracking, for taking selfies, for filming yourself, taking photographs, for logging, for spotting yourself, it's very easy to run the battery down on these things. And as I discovered in my last operation, when you get up into really cold conditions, -10 chill, wind chill, batteries actually start to fail. My battery went from 70% down in the shadow of the hill to about 20% when I was up in the freezing cold. So batteries can be affected. So I like to take another form of communication. I normally take a little 2-meter handheld with me. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to be able to reach anyone, but it is a backup. It's something else to have just in case. And I've yet to work a summit where I couldn't reach someone on 2 meters, so it's a good thing to have. A point to note, if I'm actually going to operate on 2 meters on a summit, I either take another radio or I have a spare battery. I don't use my emergency radio, my emergency comms to work the summit, because otherwise I'm likely to run my battery down. Right, if you do get stuck, if the worst happens, if something goes wrong, the most important thing is, A, someone's going to come and look for you because you've told someone where you're going to be and you haven't got in contact with them. You need to stay warm, dry, hydrated. So I take a little emergency sack. This orange thing is basically, it's like a thick plastic sleeping bag. It doesn't give you any warmth at all. That's up to your clothing, your layers. But it does protect you from the wind, protect you from the rain. It's nice and bright, and mine comes with emergency instructions on there as well, which is quite handy. There's some survival instructions to tell you what to do. So a lot of people use bothy bags. That's like a little tent for 2 or more people. And I find if you're traveling with someone else, they can be really good. You sit in them facing each other and lean back. And then it pulls nice and tight around you. They can actually be quite good if it's pouring with rain on a hilltop. You can just get inside and do your SOTA activation from inside. Just keeps you dry. If you're on your own, bothy bags tend to be a little bit on the big side. They flap around in wind and can be very exhausting. So I find the sack just a bit nicer. I sling it in the bottom of my bag. It lives there with a little emergency whistle that literally costs like £1. Again, if I fall in a ditch, I can blow that to raise awareness of my position to people. Right, little med kit. Hopefully you won't need this, but be aware I've sliced fingers on barbed wire fences putting up and down masts, so you can have minor injuries, so it's worth just taking some little basics with you. I also carry tick tweezers in mine. Apologies, tick. A tick is an insect, so for those who maybe that's a new word for you, a tick is an insect. So we certainly have them in the UK in grass and outdoor. They bite and suck blood, but if you don't take them off carefully, you can tear the head off inside, still inside you, and get infected. So I take a special pair of tweezers for removing those. The other thing is that I found a medical bandage actually makes for a really good strap to hold your mask to a fence post when you find you've forgotten your Velcro straps. And small bandages, small plasters are like little bits of PVC tape. So when you need a little bit of tape to hold your mask up or hold an aerial to the top of the mask, plasters do the job quite nicely. So I'm sure that's not how you're supposed to use it, but it is quite useful. Now, I put a light on here. I do not recommend ever operating SOTA at night. Let me say that again. Operating hills after dark is dangerous. I've done it. I've done what I felt was a familiar hill. But coming down a hill after you've been operating for a few hours, you're cold, you're tired, your legs aren't working. If you're very cold, your brain isn't working very well. You can't see your footing clearly with a head torch. And I've certainly tripped. I've twisted my ankle in a rabbit hole coming down the hill. You just can't see the dangers when you're coming down a steep incline. So I highly recommend you don't operate SOTA after dark. However, being prepared, it's a good thing to have a torch in your bag just in case you get stuck, get lost, can't move, and have to dig in for a few hours or wait to be rescued. You'll be grateful having a torch. Just put something small and light in before you go out on your SOTA summit. Just check the batteries work and leave it in there and forget about it. Right, last two things. So water. Always take water with me, even on a really short trip. Even if I don't think I'm going to need it. Again, it's just about being prepared in case something goes wrong. On a longer trip, you will need to take water with you. Now, be careful. I tend to take bottles of water. I find those Camelbacks, the little pouches that go in your backpack, they're great, but you can't tell how much you've actually drunk. And it's very easy to go through that very quickly. So a couple of years ago, I did a climb of Snowdon with my unicycle. I unicycled back down the mountain, and I used a Camelback, and I drank all the water on the way up and had nothing left to come down with. And I just didn't know how much I'd gone through. So now I take little half-litre bottles of water with me, 2 to 4, depending how long I'm going to be out walking, and that way I can monitor my water usage. I always chuck in some little energy bars. Again, it's nice just to give you a boost if you do get cold, a little bit run down. I talked about a little bit about cold. Hypothermia is really does creep up on you. It's awful. You don't realise it's happening to you. The first signs tend to be if you're logging that you struggle to write clearly. Then you'll find that you can't quite remember the call sign you were just given, and you have to ask people to repeat call signs. And from there it gets worse and worse. And you need to be really aware of the signs of hypothermia because it does creep up on you, and your judgment starts to go when you start suffering from the cold. So be ready, be aware of the signs of it. If you do find yourself becoming hypothermic, then don't just carry on operating thinking, I've just another 30 minutes. Get up, get warm, get moving, pack up, go home. The opposite of that is, of course, sun. It's very easy on a very exposed summit in a nice cool breeze on a summer's day not to realise that you're getting baked by the sun. So I tend to take clothing that covers my arms, a hat to keep the sun off my neck and my face, but I always use sun cream on my hands and face just to give myself a little bit of protection. And other little things like the bike stick are just bits and pieces that I've picked up over time. So that's a little bit about protecting ourselves. So we found our summit, we've chosen our summit, we've got ourselves all layered up with clothes and waterproof outers. We've set ourselves up with some basic safety, including telling somebody where we're going and when we're going to be there. What else before we start? Basic fitness. Climbing is not the same as walking. I walk to work every day, a couple of kilometers, no problems at all, nice and easy, fairly fit. it's completely different when you're climbing up and down hills. Very, very steep inclines. They put a lot of pressure on the foot, on the Achilles tendon, on the muscles at the front and the back of the calf, and on the fronts of the thighs. And those muscles, those quads on the front of the thighs, affect your kneecap, how your knees work. So they can cause pain and discomfort in your knees. If you're going to be doing a particularly challenging hill, I highly, highly recommend that you build up your physical fitness by doing smaller hills on a regular basis in the weeks or months leading up to it. A level 1 or level 2 point hill, you're probably not going to have any problems. But for the bigger hills, be prepared for that, and be prepared for the strain of that. This was an interesting hill when I came to do, this is Llwyd in Snowdonia a couple of weeks back. It was quite thick with snow. It doesn't actually look that bad here, but that was quite a snowy climb to get up to the top of Llwyd. It was equally snowy, just off to the left was Snowdon. It's very, very steep climb to get to the last bit of Snowdon. And it was a mixture of scree, so that's loose stone, and snow on top of it. And that was really, really hard work on the legs. Now, by the time you've worked your summit, you've done all that climbing, you've sat around for a couple of hours operating, you come to walk back down the hill, your legs are going to really feel it. And actually, people do say that the most likely time you're going to have an accident is on the way down, and that's because your legs are tired, they've become cramped, you haven't done anything for a while, so you've got cold, and your legs become weak. So you need to be really careful you don't twist an ankle, twist a knee when you're coming back down the hill. So that's just a little bit on fitness. The last thing then, we've climbed to the top of our hill, and we're going to head straight for that activation zone, that summit, yeah? So when you're actually on the hill, it's sometimes not easy to see where the summit is. Now, that sounds really stupid, but I've been on summits that are thick with woods and with undergrowth. I've been on a lot of summits, especially here in the UK, where you're covered in mist and low cloud. And actually finding the summit, finding the activation zone can be a little bit of a challenge. It's all very well having a compass and being able to read a map, but if you can't see any landmarks around you and you're not sure where you are, that's not really going to help. Here's where having that mapping application on your phone with a built-in GPS is absolutely superb. You can tell exactly where you are, exactly where you're going, and whether you're in the activation zone or not. So I do find that to be a real boon, having a GPS on the phone. Be aware though, if your battery's a bit flat, use the map, use the GPS. When you've found to where you need to be, turn off the GPS so that you don't flatten your battery. Right, so that's the climbing, that's the walking bit. So we've talked about finding our summit using the SOTA maps. We found out about researching our summit, printing out our maps, dressing appropriately, taking the right safety gear, and being match fit and finding our summit. Let's get on to the radio bit, because let's face it, that's the bit that we're going up for, isn't it? So let me talk a little bit about radios, batteries, and aerials. Talk a little bit about voice versus CW or other modes indeed, a little bit about spotting and logging, and during that we'll talk a little bit about consideration for others. So radios, what is the best radio to use on a SOTA summit? Well, it's the radio that you've got. It's the radio that you already own, that you're happy to take out to the summit in a bag, that you can run off batteries, and that isn't too heavy that it's going to cripple you. If you get really into it, you can start looking at something a little bit more specialist, but the best thing is just to start with what you've got. Now, if you want to use voice, so FM, SSB, you're going to probably end up for HF with something a bit bigger and heavier. So FT817 is a really popular choice, 5 watts maximum output. The KX3 has a little bit more. I can think 10 to 12 watts output, a little bit more power out. So those are two fantastic radios for that, but they are quite heavy. The KX3 is about 1 kilogram. The FT817 is about 1.2, 1.25 kilograms. So they're not light radios, but they're multi-mode, they do everything. At the other end of the spectrum are nice simple CW sets, either single band or multi-band. The mountain topper here puts out maybe 3 watts, which is fine for CW. That's all you need. You can get away with that. Covers 3 bands and weighs about 150 grams. So that's a significant saving over something big and heavy like an 817. Now, if you're only walking a few hundred meters to reach the top of the hill, it's no big deal. But if you're walking a long way, weight does start to become important. So it's something to think about. And obviously, with radios like the 817 and using SSB or using higher power using a KX3, you're going to need bigger batteries, and again, that's going to introduce some weight. Now, I tend to always take 2 meters as an emergency radio, but of late I've been operating a few summits using 2 meters as well. Very effective, no problems at all, even with just a little rubber duck antenna. But I do prefer to use a little bit of HF so I can give away chaser points and have more people chasing me from around the world. Thinking about bands, I like to go with at least 3 options. So I tend to go with 40 meters because it allows me to work both the UK and Europe. So it's a good local and out to, I don't know, 1,000 kilometre or so band. So it's great for working the region that you live in out to a couple of countries around you. I like to take 20 meters, 40 megs, because you can work some real DX. So I've certainly worked Australia using voice, using my KX3 before on 20 meters, and I work a lot of Americans when I'm on SOTA summits using just a couple of watts of CW as well on 20 meters. So 20 is an exciting band for SOTA. But you have to remember that with band conditions as they are at the moment, and if you have a solar activity, coronal mass ejection, 20 can be closed. You can find there's nothing there. If you have a contest on, if you're operating at the weekend, there's contests every weekend now, and you can find that your little QRP SOTA signal can be lost in the noise if you're on a traditional band like 40 meters and 20 meters. So as well as those 2 bands, I like to take one more. I like to take a walk band. So 30 meters, 17 meters or 12 meters. Now 12 is probably a bit high at the moment. That's not a lot of activity there. If you want to do voice, it's got to be 17 meters. If you're doing CW, then maybe 30 meters is a better choice. So taking 3 bands, and that gives me all the choice I need. So there's a little bit about radios. Let's look at antennas. So I said about using a handheld. You can get away with a little rubber duck on a 2 meter handheld without any problems on a summit. If you like, you could just add a little counterpoise. Just put a meter of wire attached to the outer of the aerial connector, just to give you a little bit more efficiency. But to be honest, I prefer to use an actual external antenna just to be a little bit more efficient. This is an old design from SOTA beams. Basically, this is a 2 meter dipole. So it's about 2 meters of coax, wrapped round a bit of 20 mil conduit to create a balun, and then the inner and outer are split inside. And basically, you can turn this into a vertical. And here it is up on Arran Summit. And this means I can tuck down out of the wind behind these rocks, and my antenna's stuck up nice and high. Or if you're doing a bit of SSB, you can set the same antenna up as a horizontal. So this is quite effective. And having an external antenna, I think, for 2 meters just gives you that little bit of more boost with your signal. For HF, you really cannot go wrong with a dipole. The great thing with a dipole is you can cut it to be tuned for the bands you want, and you don't have to take an ATU with you. You don't want the extra weight, the extra complexity, the extra need for patch leads of an ATU. You're going to forget something's going to go wrong. So stick with a nice simple dipole, if you like. This is a linked dipole. You can see the insulating links there with little croc clips that short them out. I'm using a SOTA Beams telescopic fishing pole here. as a mast. Now this one's 10 meters. The 6-meter versions are really cheap, but the only downside is they only collapse down to about 1 meter long, which is too big for a bag, so you have to carry them. The thing I love about this travel mast from SOTA beams is it drops down to about ½ a meter long, 50 centimeters, so I can actually put this in my backpack or wedge it in the side. In fact, if I go to the picture above, you can see my mast there in the side of my backpack. The only downside is it weighs over 1 kilogram. I think that's about 1.3 kilograms, so it's very heavy. People often talk about using trees and other available things at the top of hills to put up an antenna. I'm going to tell you now from user experience, it's not a great idea. To find a hill with a tree on that's in the right place, with the right type of tree, with a branch at the right height, clear of other obstacles that you can actually get a line over the top of is fairly rare. So I like to take my own mast with me. This one, I can either use these Velcro straps to attach it to a post. So if I'm near a fence, I can use a fence post. That's really good. But otherwise, this can be a self-supporting dipole. I use 2 dipole elements, which are just quite a thin wire. There's 2 of my guys, and then I take another piece of string to act as the 3rd guy. So again, I'm reducing the number of things I have to carry. I'm using RG174, quite a light coax as the feed. You might think, well, isn't that inefficient? But for the short length I'm going to use, 10, 12 meters, it really doesn't attenuate the signal that much. This pole can support this quite well. If it's in very high winds with this coax hanging on it, what I tend to do is use a little bit of tape, 4 or 5 positions up the pole, just to tape the coax to the pole, and that stops it all bending around and tapping and making a noise, which is quite effective. Now that antenna, with the tent pegs, the kite winders, all in a bag, weighs about 600, 650 grams. If I want to go really lightweight, I use my end-fed half-wave. Now I've got a design for this on my website, which you can look at, but basically this is just a very short piece of coax which connects to the radio. This has got a little impedance matching unit in it. And then I just use a length of wire, which is a half wavelength from the band I want to use. What you can't see is this is actually a multi-band version, and I've got SOTA beams pico traps on the other side of this wire winder, which are tiny little traps. So this is actually a 3-band, 20, 30, and 40 meter end-fed half wave. And I mount the center of this on the top of my mast, and I put it up in an inverted V, fed from one end. And this is super lightweight, and actually I have to say it's been really, really effective on the hilltops. That's a little bit lighter then, so I said the dipole was about 650 grams, this is about 250 grams. So that really saves a little bit of weight, especially if you're doing a bit of walking. So last thing then, batteries and Morse keys. So in the bad old days, I used to carry up one of those sealed lead acid slab batteries, 7 amp hour. They weigh a ton. They're really good. I can't knock them, but they weigh a lot. Fortunately, with modern battery technology, you have some other options. The Li-Fi Pose, this is a lithium iron phosphate, is it, battery? So that is it's a 4-cell, and it can give us 12 volts, 12.8 volts, fully charged. Actually, it tends to be a little bit over that fully charged, about 13.2 volts, which is perfect for most of our radios. This is one that I use for the KX3 or the FT817, and that at 4.2 amp hour will run an 817 for about 4 hours in a contest. So that gives you an idea of the power density that you have there. The other little batteries here are LiPos, and they are 3-cell, which is 11.1 volts. Now, actually, when these are fully charged, they're at about 12.5, but they gradually drop down to 11.1. It's a little bit low for some radios, but if you went for a 4-cell version, that gets you up to 15 to 16 volts, which is a bit high. You can go for that and put diodes in to volt drop a little bit, but for my little CW radios, I find the little 11.1 volt LiPos are perfect. The thing I've just got back here, I'll just mention, is from SOTA beams. It's a phone pole, I think they call this. So it's an Anderson power pole distribution unit, so I can plug a battery in and then feed 2 things from it. But the most important thing is it has a little USB charger output, and when I remember, I can take a charging lead for my phone, and if I need to, I can plug in one of my batteries and put a bit of charge into my phone. So if I've been using it for logging, GPS, everything else, and I've run it down, it gives me a little bit of an emergency boost for my phone. The last thing then I want to talk about here is keys. So I actually enjoy doing CW, and I love operating CW from hilltops. I was very nervous when I first started with SOTA, because when you call CQ SOTA, you can get a lot of people come back to you, and suddenly you find yourself at the bottom of a pile-up. And I was really worried about whether I was going to be able to manage that in CW. But actually, as you're the DX, you get to control things. So you can go at whatever speed you like and pace the whole thing how you like. So actually, I find CW really, really effective for SOTA. I have 2 favorite setups. One is using paddles, one is using a straight key. For paddles, I really love the Pico paddles, and sorry, this is a Pico paddle and a mini paddle from Palm Paddles in Germany. These are super little keys, really lightweight. When you're not using them, the paddles retract inside the case, so it protects them in transit. And the mini is great because you can hold it in one hand and then operate the paddles with the other hand. If I want to do a bit of fixed, a bit of straight key, what I tend to use is this old, I think it's a Lancaster Bomber, what they call a bathtub key. This is completely enclosed. The idea was that the spark from the key wouldn't ignite the fumes in the airplane and blow the plane up in transit. But what it means is it's also completely proof of mud, grass, rain, keeps all the elements out. So it's a great little key for using for SOTA. Right, so last thing then, let's get on to spotting and logging. So you can just go to a hill and call CQ SOTA, and you will get people pick you up. But if you want to be like proper DX, if you spot yourself, you'll find chasers from around the world will go out of their way to try and work you. So it's a great way of bringing in lots of traffic. We talked about if you're chasing using the SOTA website for going and looking at the spots. And if you have a good data connection, you can use your phone to connect to sotawatch.org and spot yourself in the normal way using the website. But if you haven't got a good data connection, but you have got marginal coverage, and here you can see I've only got 1 bar of coverage from Vodafone, you can use SMS to spot yourself using a gateway. You have to register for this, but it means that then I can just text a very simple string. The exclamation gives my call sign, followed by the summit reference, which doesn't include any punctuation. I put the frequency that I'm using, the mode I'm using, and then I can put a string of information, whatever information I want to, and that gets automatically spotted. So it's a great way of spotting where you haven't got good phone coverage. Logging. Now, some people like to paper log, some people like to electronic log. I'm a paper logger. When I'm on a hillside, I like to keep it nice and simple. I use paper and pencil. I avoid pens. Pens can stop working in the wet and they can stop working in the cold. But a pen and pencil never breaks down. These days you can get waterproof papers, so it means you can carry on logging even in the pouring rain. But I just use little notebooks and I've never had any problems with rain. Try to avoid using big notepads. Summits can be very, very windy. It's hard to control the sheet of paper. So a little notepad is really good. you'll notice that I've got a little flap of paper out here to one side. And what I do is I write important information about the summit on that. That's got the summit reference, summit name, locator, and information like that. And that means that I can flip it out when I'm logging, and if I turn a page, I can still see this information. I even have to put sometimes things like my call sign is /P because otherwise I forget it, or if I'm operating in a different area like Wales, I need to use Golf Whiskey instead of just golf, and it's very easy to forget, so I write information like that on it. James, this is James M0JCQ, he likes to electronic log. He's using a tablet here. He's had to put it in a waterproof case to save it from the elements. I think it makes it quicker when you get home. You can upload your log electronically, but the downside is if you're in very bright sunlight, you can get glare from the screen. If you're in very cold or wet conditions, the touch sensitivity can be a little bit problematic. So it's horses for courses. You have to decide what you like to do, and for me it's paper. For other people it's going to be electronic logging. Now, just to finish up on the health and safety aspects of working on a hilltop, I said earlier about the concept of the activation zone being quite big so that we don't have to be too close to the general public. And you do have to be aware of that. Hilltops are a bit crazy. You can have people with kids running around, with dogs running loose. If you've got an antenna up, people can't necessarily see the guy lines. They can't see where it's coming down. Animals will run into it. I've had this experience. And if you've got kids, they don't know what it is. They can get close to it. Even at QRP levels, you can have some quite high RF voltages there. So you just have to be a little bit considerate about other people using a hilltop when you're activating it, and try and keep away from people. And if necessary, stop operating when other people are about. Okay, so we have found our hill. We've climbed it successfully. We've activated it, we've spotted ourselves, we've logged a few contacts. Importantly, to formally activate a hill, you have to have had at least 4 contacts. You can't have a contact with someone else on the same hill, and you can't have a contact through a repeater. Although that said, you can have a contact through a satellite, which is a bit like a repeater, but it's far more challenging. So you have to have at least 4 contacts to have officially activated a hill. So when you get home and you get your feet up in front of the fire and your cup of cocoa to warm up, what you need to do to finish off your activation is to upload your log at sotadata.org.uk. So you go to submit log, and if you have done this electronically, you can export a comma-separated variable version and upload it straight away. If you're like me and you've paper logged, you have to type them in one at a time. That normally doesn't take very long, if I'm honest. As you can see here, you don't have to put signal reports in. You literally just put the time, the call sign. For the first one, you set the band and the mode, and then click add. And from that point on, you only have to put the time and the call sign. You enter all your log, click finish, and at the end of this process, you get a score for activating the summit. And anyone you've worked, or any shortwave listeners who also want to try and claim an award, who heard you, they can use this database to verify that you did actually have a contact when you said you did. And then if you want to, you can look at the results, view results, to see where you are in a big leaderboard of people, and where you score either from a chaser perspective, so you can have a chaser score, where you score as an activator, so you can have an activator score, and finally they have something called a summit to summit score. So if I climb a summit and I work somebody else on a summit, that's classed as a special contact, and we can earn specific points for that and earn certificates for that. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. That was a whistle-stop tour of SOTA, Summits on the Air, and activating a summit. So just to summarize, there's chasers, there's activators, and you can actually get a lot of pleasure from doing either. If you're going to be an activator, and that's where the fun is for me, you need to think about the walking side and the radio side separately. Be safe walking, dress well, take that emergency gear, let somebody know where you're going to be and when you're going to be considerate of others working on the summit, have a lot of fun. On the radio side, try not to forget your power lead, try not to forget your aerial, and you will find yourself acting just like GX with a massive pile-up of people trying to get you in their log and earn points for working you. It's incredibly exciting and incredibly fun, and I can't recommend it enough to everyone. So on that point, are there any questions?
Okay. Thank you, Michael. This was a nice presentation. I really appreciated it.
Have we convinced you to get up on a hilltop in Austria now? I'm going to fly out. I'm definitely going to fly over now and join you.
Yes, definitely. Yes. Okay, I have actually some questions. I made some notes here. The points, when you go on a 1 point SOTA summit, yes, what does this mean, this 1 point? Is this 1 point per activation or per QSO or?
Very good. It's 1 point per activation. So I earn a point for activating it, just 1 point, in any 12-month period. And anyone who contacts me, any of the chasers that contacted me, they earn 1 point for contacting me.
Okay.
And if I'm on a 10-pointer, I earn 10 points, just 10 points for the activation, no matter how many contacts I have.
Okay.
But everyone who contacts me, they earn 10 points.
Okay. So as far as you have 4 contacts, you get the points.
Yes.
Okay. Then you can go to the next summit.
Yes.
To get new points. Okay, understand. Yes, that's quite it. Yes, that's it.
And it's quite a challenge. So they have a number. I said it's an awards concept. So the idea is that you earn points, and you know, like many awards, when you reach certain thresholds, you can get a certificate to say how clever you are. I've been doing this now for a couple of years, and I've only just earned 100 points. As you can imagine, most of my local summits are only 1 pointers, so even if I activate them all, I can only earn sort of 15 points in a year. If you want to earn a lot of points, you have to do a bit of traveling and do some more challenging hills, or work some harder hills during the winter, so you get the winter bonus.
Okay.
And I think when you reach 1,000 points, you become what they call a mountain goat. And that's quite a challenge. That takes quite a few years, I think, of work.
I see. Okay.
Cool. So I put some links there. I did a walk up to Snowdonia and operated a few peaks up there a few weeks ago. I put a blog on my webpage at peanutpower.co.uk. And also I did a little video of that, so you can see that on my YouTube channel. So yeah, you can see how exhausted I look, but how elated I looked as I went round on that that activation.
That was quite a nice hill, I see, yes, and a nice scenery.
It was beautiful. It really was. I think the more
really beautiful.
The more challenging the summit, the more beautiful, the more fantastic the scenery you get. And that was particularly nice, but crushingly difficult doing 3 such challenging hills in one day.
Especially at this cold temperatures.
Yes. Yeah, in some ways it was quite nice having it slightly cooler, because obviously I'm doing a lot of intensive walking, and having the cooler temperatures is nice, but then when you stop to operate, you cool down really quickly. And it's really important that you do all you can to get out of the wind and protect yourself and your hands from that. So what about you, Dennis? Have we convinced you to climb a hill? Oh, you're on mute, I think.
Maybe we. There you go. Yep. I should do it.
Can we hear you?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Hello.
Well, it goes to show you've not looked at the thing, because I've even got a SOTA award on the wall.
Have you? I've not researched you well enough, have I? So I've not seen you active on a hilltop for some time then.
No. No, because one of the things that I got left with after catching sepsis was knackered joints.
Ah, yeah, and
so
you're really going to feel that doing a
I can
doing
get
a hill.
up there. It's getting
It's coming back down. Yes.
But I've got. I think if I filled out, I've got one of those little waterproof booklets.
Yes.
Books. And if I put, I've still not updated the thing, but if I update it, I'm sure I've got over 500 points actually.
Wow, that is pretty good.
The one I've got on the wall there is 250. So.
Even that's pretty impressive. As somebody who's just reached 100, just past 100 points, I know how difficult that is.
I wasn't going far. It was mainly when we went to the lakes for holidays and things like that.
Yeah.
So, but I worked it out that I did like 3 on one walk. I did 3 peaks because if I stayed at Patterdale,
yeah,
near Ullswater, you could walk up Grisdale up to there's a 6-pointer there.
Yes.
I can't remember what it's called. Then you walk up, come back down that and go up the side up to Fairfield, all along the ridge down to St Sunday Crag, and then drop down back into Patterdale.
You do find yourself wondering why people don't put cable cars between the tops of these. It would make SOTA activation so much easier.
Well, the last time I was up, what was really frightening was, and this highlights why it's important to let people know where you go, also understanding your map, and everything else. I was on St Sunday Crag and I was operating a station, and they happened to say where I was. LD11 St Sunday Crag and that. And this couple walked past and then waved at me. And about 2 minutes later, they came back. Waited till I finished and said, "Excuse me, can you tell me where we are again?" And I told them, and they went, "Oh, so where's so-and-so?" And I says, 4 miles back that way. What they'd done, they'd come up onto Fairfield and took the wrong footpath.
Yeah.
They had no map. They weren't dressed correctly.
Even with the map, it's so easy to do. But at least with the map, when you've gone a short distance, you know you're going off track, don't you?
Right.
So you can work your way
but
back.
The frightening thing about it was 3 weeks beforehand, there was an avalanche on St Sunday Crag, and Patterdale Mountain Rescue had to go and rescue 4 people.
Wow. Actually, while I was at Snowdonia a couple of weeks back, a guy, he hadn't even actually got that high. He'd twisted his ankle and was obviously stuck. You couldn't carry him from there, and they had to bring the helicopter in to airlift him off.
Yeah.
He was just out for an afternoon's walk and never thought anything like that was going to happen. So it just goes to show you how easy it is to have an accident and find yourself having to be rescued.
Yeah, although I had a little bothy, like you were mentioning,
yes.
But I also took a space blanket as well. And right, that was kept in there as well. Because it's not necessarily just for me, but if I come across somebody,
exactly,
the first
find
thing
someone
you
else.
wrap somebody up in to try and keep up. And there was various, I always carried a compass, so I always had a whistle, even first aid kit, everything. So people said, "Why do you need all that?" I said, "One day you'll never know."
Exactly, and as you say, it's not even necessarily for yourself. It can be to help somebody else. And the thing is, a lot of these things weigh very little and take very little space. It takes nothing to take them with you, does it?
So it totally supports what you're saying, and totally agree with it all. But yeah, I've enjoyed it, and once I get sorted out and a bit more, so I want to get back to chasing as well, because I've got 250 on chasing as well.
That's pretty good. I'm trying to work on my summit to summit because I thought that would be the smart way to.
Well, I've got
points,
a couple of them into thing, but if you'll see me thing on the But yeah,
I'm going to go and look your score up now and see what I need to get to beat you.
Well,
Are there separate scores for chasers and activators and summit to summit? For every category is a different.
Yeah, well, when you put your score,
when
you put your score in the table, you put the details in, and it's separate, and then you can go and look, and you can actually click on if you want to see what your summits to summits are, what your chaser ones are, what your activation. You can see, you can bring up all the different charts. It's really, whoever did the database, and I cannot remember such a long time ago. It was very well thought out, and it's been improved over the years, but it's been very well thought out, and it's a credit to
the guys who manage it and who run it. And I know that there are regional teams as well, but they do an amazing job, don't they?
Richard, G3CWI, and a couple of others. They were really pushing it, and they got other groups around the US and all around Europe. I can't remember which ones are going. I know there was a big group in France at one time that did it. It's really, really good, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. When you get to the top of, say, Skidor or the top of Elvelin, or even a small one like Blencathra, because you can either go up the front of Blencathra, up the edge, or you can take a nice gentle stroll around the edge and walk up the back.
Yeah.
Right? And on a nice steaming hot day, that's a nice gentle walk all the way up to the top. You're not straining or stressing or anything. And just sitting there, sunny, it's absolutely brilliant.
I mean, it's a good point you make, actually, and something I realised when I was doing my last climb, which was a little bit harder. Actually, sometimes pacing yourself, you don't want to get too hot and sweaty, because otherwise you get cold when you stop moving. So actually, sometimes just going at a bit of a slower pace than you can manage helps just to regulate your temperature, and that way you don't get so cold when you get to the top.
But I enjoyed it. Just the stillness, the quietness, everything. It was just like, on some occasions, it was just like I was jumping from a parachute, really, because it was so quiet. I don't know if whoever's jumped from a parachute, but I have. And once the plane's disappeared and you're floating down, it's dead quiet. All you can hear is the wind rustling through the chute, and that's what it was like, sitting on top of it. Just loved it. Fantastic.
I was very lucky when I did my Snowdonia trip the other week. The Snowdon itself was very busy, as you can imagine. Lots of people there, but it was taking the full force of the wind as well. We had 70 to 80k wind there. But the previous summit I'd done, Clwyth, a couple of hours before, when I got to the top of that, the wind must have been hitting the side of the mountain, going straight up, and it created a little bubble of calm right at the top of the mountain. So actually I could sit there right on the top of the mountain on my own in perfect stillness. It was absolutely fantastic. And then you'd walk back 2 meters and it was like a hurricane. But it was fantastic, and the views, I'd obviously picked weather when I knew the weather was going to be good and the views were going to be there. So, oh, look at that. That's a certificate.
Yeah, that's what well, I don't know what they look like now.
250. I think they're the same.
2008, that.
I'm just about to send off for my 100-pointer, because I think that's the first one I can get.
Yeah, 2008, that.
Bless.
That goes to show how long since I've done it. But yeah, wholeheartedly, people must have. You probably heard of Colin, M1BUU, BBU. So
yes,
he's mountain goat on both sloth and mountain goat.
And didn't he? I think he made his transceiver at the top of the mountain, didn't he, for the last one?
For the last one, yeah. Well, I had a version 1 mounting, the Rockmite PCBs. Right. Well, version 3, which Rex brought out, you had to do a modification to it, which is going to be a bit difficult out there because you've got to solder stuff on the back of the PCB as well as on the front. So I had a version 1 left. no mods to it whatsoever, so it made it easy for
Fantastic.
to build that up there. I've just received the SOTA kit.
Oh, what's that? I've not come across that.
That's Steve Webber's latest one. It's there was only 100 kits produced.
Oh, you got
Collins
one of them,
and somebody else's has gone to Australia.
Yeah.
Oh, you've heard, have you, Albert?
Oh, I saw that on the Twitter feed. Yeah.
Oh,
have to have a good laugh. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you not got a camera?
I'm kind of hiding out in a dark kitchen at the moment. Let me see if I can put it on. Yeah.
Yeah, it's only that big. Where's my camera? Oh, hello.
there he is.
Would you buy a car from that guy? A used one, Couldn't resist.
Thank you. So, Michael, thank you very much for the presentation. I have recorded it, found it very interesting. I'm hoping that I'll be able to get out and have a go at doing at least an activation or two with the club and see how we get on.
Take the satellite gear, do a satellite operation from the hilltop.
But
remember, you've got to work 4 stations, so that's going to be a challenge.